This is Pacifica Radio's Letters and Politics. On today's show, as the government is just hours away from shutting down unless Congress agrees to a spending measure, we'll spend the hour with economist Richard Wolff. We'll talk about what it means for the government to shut down, what it means for the economy, and where we are as a country. Richard Wolff is Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a visiting professor at the New School in New York. He is the host of the program Economic Update and author of the book Understanding Capitalism. Richard Wolff joins us next on Letters and Politics. But first, the news.
For Pacifica Radio, I'm Christina Onnested. President Donald Trump spoke to military officials who gathered from posts around the globe today in Virginia, where he pledged to fight against the enemy within and said he wants to send troops to U.S. cities for military training.
Last month, I signed an executive order to provide training for quick reaction force that can help quell civil disturbances. This is going to be a big thing for the people in this room because it's the enemy from within, and we have to handle it before it gets out of control. It won't get out of control. But I want to salute every service member who has helped us carry out this critical mission. It's really a very important mission. And I told Pete we should use some of these dangerous cities as training grounds for our military, National Guard, but military.
The military is designed to handle foreign threats, the move likely setting the stage for further legal challenges to the use of troops on U.S. soil and cities. Trump took aim at what he called the radical left and its funding of insurrectionists, he said. He spoke after Defense Secretary Pete Hegseth announced directives to undo DEI initiatives and railed against what he called a woke agenda in the U.S. Army.
For too long, we've promoted too many uniformed leaders for the wrong reasons, based on their race, based on gender quotas, based on historic so-called firsts. We've pretended that combat arms and non-combat arms are the same thing. We've weeded out so-called toxic leaders under the guise of double-blind psychology assessments, and we lost our way. We became the woke department, but not anymore.
Hegseth used the platform to slam physical fitness and grooming standards that are gender neutral, environmental policies, and transgender troops. He called for other changes, including to documenting disciplinary incidents, and said we're, quote, overhauling an inspector general process that's been weaponized, putting complainers, ideologues, and poor performers in the driver's seat. After reports that Trump will send 100 National Guard troops to Chicago, Illinois, Governor J.B. Pritzker blasted the move as authoritarian and racist at a press conference Monday, where he ticked off a list of violent and even deadly encounters with the president's federal immigration agents in tactical gear and face coverings between them and the residents of Illinois.
They're not targeting violent criminals or gang members. They're arresting tamale vendors and delivery men and shaking down families. Donald Trump and Kristi Noem and Tom Homan said they were targeting the worst of the worst criminals. They lied, and they continue to lie. 60% of the individuals that ICE has taken in Illinois this year have no criminal convictions of any kind. ICE is running around the loop harassing people for not being white. Just a year ago, that was illegal in the United States. Now, ICE is making it commonplace.
In Congress, lawmakers are hearing testimony about the president's response to crime as a ruse to deploy federal agents in Washington, D.C., Los Angeles, and other city streets. Lawmakers have until midnight to reach an agreement to fund the government or face a partial shutdown by midnight. Shutdown appears more likely after lawmakers met Monday, then doubled down their positions, with Democrats seeking to restore and preserve health care and food assistance funding, and Republicans rejecting it. Edwin Vieira has more.
Democrats are demanding Medicaid cuts made in the unpopular budget megabill be restored and Affordable Care Act insurance subsidies be extended. After meeting with them, Vice President J.D. Vance accuses them of using their leverage to make drastic demands.
Don't use your policy disagreements as leverage to not pay our troops. Now, don't say the fact that you disagree about a particular tax provision is an excuse for shutting down the people's government.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer says the $1 trillion cut from Medicaid and the millions of consumers who would be priced out of Obama health coverage require immediate action. Schumer says he's not sure the president is aware how serious it is.
Closing of rural hospitals. The fact that so many clinics are closing. And I don't know if we knew this before, but the fact that people will pay $400 more a month, close to $5,000 more a year on their health care premiums.
While furloughing federal employees would be the usual step in a shutdown, Trump is calling for agencies to consider mass firings in an effort to cut federal spending. And a separate fight is brewing over housing funds. The administration is trying to reshape a Department of Housing program which funds low-income support programs. Advocates want lawmakers to include a no-cost provision in either a continuing resolution or the agency's budget, ensuring existing grants are renewed. I'm Edwin J. Vieira for Pacifica Network and Public News Service.
The administration's warning several agencies could face layoffs and firings. The Health and Human Services Department looking at a 40% workforce reduction should a shutdown occur. The Education Department, 1,500 of 1,700 employees could lose their jobs, excluding federal student aid workers. It would not impact disbursement of student grants or loans. An analysis by the moderate think tank Third Way this month found red state residents receive Obamacare health care subsidies more than Democratic states, indicating they have more to lose with a shutdown and without adhering or meeting Democrats' demands. 17 million people in states won by Trump in 2024 benefited from an Affordable Care Act or Obamacare tax credit in 2025 this year, compared to just 7 million in states won by Kamala Harris. Israel's foreign ministry is accusing the Samud flotilla of having ties to Hamas and warning of repercussions as a convoy of some 50 boats carrying humanitarian aid enters a high-risk orange zone nearing Gaza's coast to deliver food and other needs amidst a starvation crisis there. Director General of Israel's foreign ministry, Eden Bartal, spoke to reporters today.
It is a provocation, political one, organized by Hamas, aimed to support Hamas propaganda, steal the good hearts of the people around the world, but it is not humanitarian aid.
The Samud flotilla's organizers have blamed Israel for drones that have detonated on its ships already. Meanwhile, the Conscience flotilla that was bombed set sail today after repairs, this with journalists and medics aboard to raise awareness of Israel's unprecedented killing of some nearly 200 journalists in Gaza and hundreds of medical workers. I'm Christina Onnested reporting for Pacifica Radio.
Good day and welcome to Letters and Politics. I'm Mitch Jeserich. I feel here in my final few weeks as host of this radio program, I must start each show now with a reminder that I am stepping down as host and that my final show will be on October 16th. Radio is funny, in which someone may be listening at 10 a.m. on Tuesday, but then perhaps not again until Wednesday of the next week or some other day. I'm sure there's people listening now who haven't heard us in a few days. And at least on radio waves, when you say something, it goes out there and then it disappears. There's something about that I've always liked. It has always reminded me of the Tibetan sand mandala that is erased after monks work on it for weeks on end to signify that everything is impermanent. And everything is impermanent. Again, I am leaving on my own free will and with a deep appreciation for this radio station, for the people I work with, and for you. No one ever really leaves this radio station, so the saying goes. And I'm sure I'll still be doing special broadcasts here and there, so we'll stay in touch that way. This is my community, and I don't plan to leave it entirely, but I do plan to dabble into some other things, and I'll talk about those more in the coming days. But for now, I want to get into today's show because it's an important one as we live an important time. Also seems like an unprecedented time. And I would say this regardless if the government was set to shut down tonight, which, as I speak right now, it looks like it is set to shut down. Well, today I'm very happy to welcome back to this program a good friend to this program, a good friend to me and part of our community here at this radio station, and somebody that I have learned immensely from over the years, as I know you have as well. And that is Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff is Professor Emeritus of Economics at the University of Massachusetts Amherst and a visiting professor at the New School in New York. He's the host of the program Economic Update and the author of many books, including Understanding Capitalism. Professor Wolff, sir, it's always a great pleasure, sir, to see you. Thank you for joining me.
It's my pleasure as well, and I don't mind saying that it's with a touch of sadness that I hear you describe your departure. You had mentioned it to me, and I know it is difficult for you, and it is, I'm sure, difficult for all those that have come to rely on the courageous program you have mastered for I don't know how many years.
16 years, and you've been a part of it right from the beginning, because this program launched right when the economic crisis happened. It began in 2009. Actually, we started talking to you before then. It began in 2009 as a pilot project covering the first 100 days of the new Obama administration, the first 100 days of Obama's presidency. And so you've been a part of this program for many years. Again, I'm not going away, right? I'm transforming. I'll be doing other things. I'll still be here. I have received a good number. I don't want to say hundreds because that would be overdoing it, but a good number of really sincere and thoughtful notes from listeners, and I'm thankful to people for those notes. And some people have expressed that they still feel a bit sad too, and I haven't responded to them all because I feel the emotion in it, and I'm like, well, let me take a moment to respond, and then something else comes up, and another one comes in. You know how these things sometimes work, Professor, and then things get buried, and I'm going to try to respond to all of them. But I just want to say, this is not a death. This is not a retirement. Sometimes it's starting to feel like, at least how I'm attending my own funeral, which it's not. Where it's just life is impermanent and life changes, and we do. You retired, and look, you're busier than you've ever been. So
Absolutely. Absolutely. I retired and had visions of sitting on the proverbial rocking chair, watching the grass grow. None of that ever happened.
yeah, you had visions of grandeur when
Yeah.
you went to retire.
Uh, you know,
I'm not. Yeah.
Let me add something. I think what's happening is that you're becoming, and this is not a fault of yours, a bit of a symbol. I think an awful lot of people are now slowly and painfully becoming aware that the American empire, within which we all grew up from birth to this moment, those of us that are still here, it's dying, it's disappearing, it's going the way of every empire the human race has ever experienced. It's born, it evolves over time, and then it passes away. And the daily newspaper that assaults everything you thought you believed in and that you thought was at least minimally honored in this society being dishonored is very hard. And then if someone you've counted on, like Mitch Jeserich, steps down, however, partially, it somehow feeds in to this larger sense of something basic being lost. And I want people to understand that that's perceptive. That's not a mistake. That's not an exaggerated. No, you are expressing, in this case, around the particulars of Mitch Jeserich, a broader feeling of loss and decline that is an accurate assessment of what we're going through.
Hmm. Let's talk about empire. You said the decline of empire, the end of empire. I thought this was going to be something to celebrate.
Yeah. Well, I am a student of that great German philosopher Hegel, and one of his greatest achievements was to teach us the contradictoriness of everything, to understand that to explain something is to expose the contradictions. It is dying and it is being born. Those things are two sides of the same ongoing contradictory process. I remember my biology teacher, who also had been touched by Hegel, explaining to us how all the cells in our body die. They're continuously dying. And we are continuously, in a sense, being born. And life is this combination of death and birth. And isn't that the case? So yeah, the US empire is declining, and that's making room for all kinds of other things to emerge. And we are living through the incapacity of our government at this time and of a significant minority, thankfully, of our people who are unable to cope, who don't understand that what they see dying goes with something being born, and that they might find beauty and satisfaction and attraction in that which is being born, unless they're blind to it and see only what is declining. As I read what comes out of this government, it's an endless catalog of complaint about what isn't there again, starting with the red hat. Make America great again. That's an admission that it isn't now. And they want to reverse time, which they know no one can do. They can't do it either. That's not a solution. It's a fantasy. And it's usually a sign of desperation if you're not working on a real solution, but instead indulging in a fantasy. And it becomes morbid when you hurt other people who don't share your fantasy. And we're living through that. We are not the first people to live through a declining empire. We are in the company of virtually every culture on earth. We didn't think we would. That's common to the empire
That's
too.
common to empire, isn't it? The hubris.
Yes, they all think theirs is the one exception. I'm. It's like that Lake Wobegon. Everybody's above average. We need to understand. There's a certain charm. There's even a certain beauty in wanting to hold on. It is part of life, as long as it doesn't overwhelm being able to welcome what is new and what is different. It is remarkable. It is remarkable. I'm sitting here talking to you from New York City.
Yeah.
There's a very good chance, as things look now, that in a few days, when we have our early November election, we are going to elect a Muslim socialist to be the mayor of the largest city in the United States. Now, talk about something new being born, there it is. And talk about Mr. Trump, who promises to invade his own biggest city with troops to prevent the birth of what Mamdani represents. Well, there you have, as stark as you could imagine, the birth and the death, one instinct against another. And that's being played out because that's where we are. We are at the decline of an empire.
I had hoped with the decline of the American empire that it would look more like the decline in the middle of the 20th century of European empires, with the creation, sort of a focus inward, a focus on the people within their country, and with, sort of the creation of a welfare state slash, I call it a welfare state, maybe I should say safety net programs. But I had thought, okay, that's what will happen here, but that, at least as of now, I don't remember Europe going through these upheavals at the end of their empires, at least at home.
Well, they did and they didn't. I think the difference you're pointing to, and Lord knows it's very, very important, is that they never had a kind of cutthroat, take no prisoners capitalism. You see, the United States is different from Europe in a very, very basic way. In Europe, the capitalist system grew out of a deeply entrenched, rich, pre capitalist culture, the culture of feudalism, the culture of the Greek and Roman empires, the culture of the Roman Catholic Church. Good and bad mixed together, I understand, but this is a deep, complicated culture. And one of the things it stressed was collective responsibility. The church presented itself as one great family. In Italy, the Pope is called Il Papa. He's the father. And look at the church, right? All of the officials are father this, and it's the idea we are responsible for one another. We turn the other cheek. We are our brother's keeper, and on and on and on. And so capitalism had to overthrow those systems, which it did, very bloody. French Revolution was not a friendly affair, but a lot was carried into capitalism, taking care of people. And the socialist movement that developed as a critique of capitalism built on some of those pre-capitalist. Here in the United States, you had a weird, different situation. The Europeans who came here obliterated the people they found here, killed them in huge numbers. Ethnic cleansing, settler colonialism, whatever you want to call it. The horror of what was done here, we now see in Gaza. And there are more than a few similarities. But it meant that the capitalism established here by the Europeans had no feudalism to come to terms with, no population steeped in what we would now say is the indigenous cultures with all of they were obliterated. They were seen as quote unquote savage. They were not to be learned from, emulated, deferred to, none of that. There was no comparable Roman Catholic Church of the indigenous people to teach its values to the upcoming Europeans. You remember how many of the early settlers were criminals, were outcasts. They were people who were told back at home in Europe, you go to jail or you can go to the colonies. And they chose the colonies, as I would have too. But it means we started with a very specific group of people in a very specific environment. And so, yeah, it's different. And we can't have, not yet, we can't have the kind of turning inward to build our own community now that we're no longer, trying to control the rest of the world, which won't have us or let us do that anymore anyway. I look at the difficulty Israel is having. Look at the isolation Israel is finding itself in. A whole world living through an anti-colonial century, watching this one odd reverse colonialism. The only thing more bizarre and tone deaf than that is the decision of Britain and America to take a British former prime minister who couldn't run for office in England because he lied about the Iraq War and got caught doing it, is going to oversee the development of this. I mean, you have got to understand these are signs of a declining empire. When it can't see what's happening, it's too painful. So it pretends it isn't happening. 9/10 of Mr. Trump's government is the pretense that the United States is super powerful. It isn't. It hasn't been. That's not what a declining empire is. You know what a declining empire is? It's the one who imagines it's still an empire. And it gets sadder and sadder with each passing day.
And here we are with the threat and potential verge. It's sounding like it's going to happen, but we've been here before, of a government shutdown
Yes.
in less than 12 hours from now. And I remember when we first started talking about government shutdowns some 15 years ago. And even in the 90s, I think sort of the first big one during the Clinton presidency, it was a big deal. It was, oh, the world's coming to an end. What's going to happen? And now it's a common occurrence, it seems, almost annually. Is this a sign? And has this been a sign and a symptom of what it means, do you think, to be a declining empire?
Yeah, it's not so much the closing of the government, but the way it's a sign of the declining empire is that this closing is a direct, staggering contradiction to everything else this government is trying to do. That's the sign. When you cobble together things, that don't go well. It's watching the child learning to cook, mixing together raspberry jam and mustard. It's not a good idea in most cases, right? So let me explain. Shutting down the government is an admission of extreme social division, inability to work out something as fundamental that touches virtually everybody, to make the necessary compromises. In other words, to do what you never had to worry about during the time when the empire was strong. But you're not. You're not able to do it now. And if I were a CEO of a corporation, American or foreign, being told by Mr. Trump in every way, including with his tariffs, come back to America, you should be coming back to America. The last thing on earth you would want is this. This is not an inducement to come back. This is an inducement to go anywhere else. The government isn't about to shut down anywhere else.
Yeah.
And certainly not in the countries that are competing with us. So here you have the government, come back, come back. I'll lower the tariff if you come back. If you invest in America, I'll do this. Meanwhile, I'm letting the country fall apart. I'm using the military to invade my major cities. I'm threatening that if Mr. Mamdani wins in New York, I won't let him become. What kind of speech is this? What are you telling the rest of the world? And by the way, I talk to American CEOs of fairly big companies, and I say to them, "Are you coming back?" They laugh. They said we would do it if we were coming back to where we can fund. But you're asking us to commit suicide as enterprises. We can't do that. You can't ask us to do, or you can ask all you want, but we're not going to do it. And one more headline of shutting down the government, one more headline about troops invading, one more headline where the police chief of a town about to be invaded by the U.S. government explains that they have no crime problem, that crime has been going down, they don't want the troops, they don't. I mean, this is impossible. You are advertising your dirty linen. And then you're surprised that people say, I'm not doing this. I'm not going there. I'm not going to build a factory in a place where I don't know what kind of chaos will be there next month, next year, and so forth. And that the fact that that's the case, and the fact that the people doing these contradictory policies cannot or do not say a word about it, those are your signs of empire decline.
This is Letters in Politics, and we are in conversation with economist Richard Wolff. Richard Wolff is the host of the program Economic Update, author of many books, including Understanding Capitalism. Friends, as we speak to you, we are in the middle of a very important fall fund drive for this radio station. This is the time of year that we come to you asking you for a financial contribution that you can afford, that's according to your means, and one that you feel good about as you go upon your day, knowing that you did your part. I ask for a $25 pledge, a $50 pledge, a $75 pledge, a $100 pledge. Of course, we're in California, one of the most affluent places in the entire world, and we know we have friends who can afford more than that, $500 or $1,000. We're not asking for a contribution that you can't make. If you have to look at your bank statement to make one, we ask you not to make it, because if you're not okay, it does us no good either. We're in this together. But if you are in a position to make a financial contribution to this radio station, to keep it on the air, to keep Richard Wolff and Richard Wolff's show, Economic Update, on the air, to keep me around to be able to at least do some special broadcasts here and there, and, to still be a part of this community, I ask you to make that contribution. Now, Richard Wolff is joining us live, and we do have a challenge this hour from Yusra in Palo Alto, who is putting up $1,200. As long as we're making progress, and I see people on the phones and online making donations, as long as we're making progress towards that challenge of $1,200, we can do less appealing to you to make that contribution and keep it more on the content of what we want to talk about today. But when I see those numbers dwindle down, or at least the number of people online dwindling down, that's when I have to once again give you the phone number, which is for KPFA listeners and KFCF listeners, so basically Northern California, 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. For our friends in Southern California listening to KPFK in Los Angeles, the number you're going to call is 818-985-5735. 818-985-5735, and online at kpfk.org. And Professor Wolff, this is an important hour for us for many reasons, including my home station, KPFA. We were knocked offline over the last couple of hours. Luckily, we came back online by the time you showed up, and we went on air, but we weren't able to raise funds over the last couple of hours, which are really important hours, both Cap Brooks and Law and Disorder, which is our drive time 8 o'clock show, and then Democracy Now!, our flagship program, at 9. So we are really behind. I'm hoping this hour we can have a good hour to make up a little bit of what we lacked for the previous 2 hours. We're now back up and running again. You can give us a call and help us make that up. Again, 1-800 for KPFA listeners, 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, and online at kpfa.org. And in Southern California, 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, online at kpfk.org. Yeah, Professor, not easy to operate a radio station outside the traditional. We do it because we don't take advertisements. We don't take corporate. We don't even get even these cuts of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting. They cut us off a long time ago. So we have, the way we function is from listener support. So we do it outside of sort of this traditional. We try to do something different within this capitalist system we live in. You understand that. You talk a lot about co-ops. We're not a co-op, but we're democratically run. But it's still hard. It's hard to operate in a capitalist system in ways that aren't in line with capitalist values.
Yeah, that's the mark of a system, and particularly of a system that is very nervous about anyone departing from its rules, its regulations, and its traditions. Worker co-ops have been an attractive way of doing business for Americans from long before we became an independent nation. No one should be on any illusion on that. I used to take a few friends here in the Northeast where I live to a farm, and it was near Pittsfield, Massachusetts, and it was the home of the Shaker community. Now, some of you know all about it because you're familiar with their extraordinarily beautiful woodwork. They make, chairs and tables, and it's called the Shaker design. It's been picked up by others. It's extraordinary in its simplicity. Well, the Shakers were a denomination of Protestant Christianity. They pre-exist the American Revolution. Their community, by the way, still operates that same farm in Pittsfield. You can go there. It's like an outdoor museum of their buildings, and you can see how they worked. That was a co-op. They were particularly famous for taking in women, and the women who came and populated it were women who were very often running away from domestic abuse situations, often with their children, having no place to go in that society because there were no battered women's shelter or anything like that. And so they heard about and they went to the Shakers, and the Shakers took them in, no questions asked, with children, without children, gave them a place to sleep, gave them a task to do along with everybody else, and simply integrated them into their larger community. And they understood that to be their Christian duty, their Christian a way of expressing their commitment to their faith. And farmers have been remarkably prone to organizing co-ops. The Grange and other institutions of farming have often come out of, not always, but often come out of efforts of farmers to share the land or to share the plow or to share the plow horse or to get together. Nothing is more quintessentially rural than everybody realizing building a barn is too difficult for one farmer to do by himself. So they would do this very famous thing. Next Saturday and Sunday, we will prepare a wonderful feast, and everybody comes to the house, and together we will put up the barn, and we will feed everybody, and it'll be a community event. And 2 weeks later, we'll go to the next farmer who helped build the first barn, and now we'll build one for him. And that's how the communities were built. So yeah, but this is a system that's very nervous about another way of organizing. It's very frightened. It's a threat. It's a threat. The fact that Christians in their faith did it is lost on these people. They want to make being pro-capitalist equivalent to being pro-Christian or something like that. You can see it in Mr. Trump and his pronunciamentos literally the last few days. This is sad. It declines diversity. It means we don't have a country full of interesting experiments in other ways of doing things. So if and when the capitalist one peters out, we have others that we have been working on. Worker co-ops are much bigger in Italy or Britain or Germany or France than they are here. They're not so afraid. Their capitalists are doing fine, but they are coexisting with others. If you go to Bologna in the north of Italy, is an economy, because I give lectures on it, 40% of the economy of Bologna in northern Italy is worker co-ops. And they wouldn't have it any other way. And that's what the people there, it's a thriving part of Italy, by the way, but that's what the people want there. And they have, therefore, an option if things don't go well with their capitalist enterprises, they have experienced people who can help develop. None of that goes on in this country, and we all pretend that it doesn't matter.
We are $504 towards that $1,200 challenge. I want to thank Edward in Emeryville for Edward's generosity, Craig in Concord, and a name I see a lot of these names again and again and again, Professor, including this one, Doris in Oakland, who's always been very kind during this hour. So, Doris, I thank you for your contribution again. We're $504. The callers have slowed down, though. The number is 1-800. This is for KPFA listeners, KFCF listeners. 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732. And online at kpfa.org. In Southern California, listening to KPFK in Los Angeles, the number is 818-985-5735. 818-985-5735, and online at kpfk.org. Richard Wolff, I want to come back to this dynamic of where you are in New York, Mamdani and Donald Trump, and that dynamic that's going on. I saw your most recent show that will air in a few days here at my home station, KPFA, but it's called something to the effect, I don't have it in front of me, so forgive me if I'm off a little bit, but basically American Fascism. And I know it was based on an interview you did with somebody who wrote a book about that very, very topic.
Yes.
But the fact that you called your show American Fascism is interesting to me. Yesterday we had on Robert Reich, a progressive, but not a communist,
Right.
but a progressive. And he now fully calls what's going on in this country fascism. And, you and I have been talking about fascism for a long time now. We started talking about it really during the first Trump presidency. And I always felt that, well, I think Trump has fascist tendencies, but the state's not fascist. We've seen a huge decimation of the state in these first year of Trump's presidency. And now I'm not so sure anymore. And I used to think after the first Trump presidency, maybe I talked about fascism too much. Maybe I overdid it. Maybe, it's good to be self-reflective on how we talk about things, I think. But now I'm not so sure, where do you think we are when it comes to fascism?
We're getting there. I still wouldn't say that we're there. We'll be there when you and I can't have this conversation. Then we will have arrived. But we're not there yet. But my history. I was born in Ohio, and I've lived and worked in the United States all my life. I'm an American 100%, and glad of it. But my parents were Europeans. My father French, my mother German. My mother spent 2 years of her life in a concentration camp. And so I had to learn all the stories. Two of my grandparents were killed in Auschwitz, and many of our relatives were killed in various other Nazi, fascist killing places. I don't know what else to call them. So all of that is present. I didn't suffer any of them, but I've heard about them all my life from people that I was as close to as any I can think of. So I'm very attuned to it. I'm very worried about it. Hitler developed his own military. Trump has developed ICE. I am not naive. I understand that you start off by explaining that your military has a very narrow, particular focus, but it's your military and you're using the government money to build it up. And then after a while, as Mr. Trump told us last week, he's going to use the regular army to protect the ICE army from the protests that people. Okay, this is all very familiar. This is not new. This is not original. This is not Mr. Trump. This is a pattern. And we have seen it whether in Mussolini's Italy or in Franco's Spain or Hitler's Germany. I mean, yes, only ignorance would enable you to miss the parallels and the desire to shut down everybody else. You can't speak, you can't have a different point of view, and then the behavior of whoever's at top in confusing their own personal animosities with the larger political and doing it kind of because there's no opposition allowed. Again, these are the signs that ought to have you very, very worried. Look,
And fascism does come out of democratic republics,
yes,
historically speaking, and it doesn't come easy. It doesn't come smoothly. It's usually a huge struggle. If you look at Germany in the early 1930s, it's a wild story. There are
yeah,
straight gunfights between communist and socialist and fascist throughout Germany. And in Bavaria, where Munich is, and this is where the Nazis came from, Bavaria, for a short period of time, was a Soviet republic.
absolutely. It called itself the Bavarian Soviet Socialist Republic. There was another one a few miles down the road in Budapest, Hungary, which declared itself the Hungarian Soviet Socialist Republic. So yeah, no, we are moving in those directions. Germany before Hitler had the most democratic constitution the world has ever seen. Let me give you an idea. It was called the Weimar Republic because it was established in a relatively small German city, Weimar, right at the end of World War II. Uh, they had a two chamber parliament, but not like we do, elect from your neighborhood your representative, elect from your neighborhood your senator. No, no, no. You elected representatives in the neighborhood you lived, and then you also elected representatives from the workplace where you worked. In other words, the working class dominated everywhere and it elected people who knew what its problems were on the job. Your wage, your working conditions, the split between home and workplace of your life, and all of that and that was an attempt to really make democracy real, to give people the support, the time, the money, to be knowledgeable about what the issues were that they would vote about. So you went from one of the most democratic uh, political systems imaginable to its polar opposite, a rigid Hitlerian dictatorship. So, yeah, your past is no guarantee at all. Look at the French. The French became complicit. Half of French became the Vichy government, which was collaborating with the Germans. And yet the French, to this day, are the people who go into the street to make their democratic needs, wanted. The current lame government that they have, Mr. Macron, who gets lower popularity ratings than Mr. Trump for a longer time, uh, he came up with the brilliant idea of solving France's economic problems by taking two holidays of the calendar when all workers have vacation and saying, henceforth, the workers would not have a vacation on those 2 days. They would have to go to work, but for no increase in pay. And then he was surprised when 5 million French workers gave him the middle finger and said, not going to happen. We're going into the streets. You keep that up, we will. And he withdrew it, as he has done in the past when he has made the same mistake. He's forever testing the people, and the people are showing him, oh, no, no, we participate here. We're not going to spend hours debating this, and we're not going to wait until the next election to bring. No, no, no. Right now, this week, on Friday, this country stops. Wow. Wow. You know, it's something Americans who give lip service to democracy and who are now looked at by the rest of the world as continuing to give lip service to a democracy that they are busy eradicating.
Quick update towards that $1,200 challenge that came in from Yusra. We're making our way there. We are $1,023 towards that $1,200. So we are just a little under $200 from making it. The phone number again for KPFA listeners and KFCF listeners is 1-800-439-5732. 1-800-439-5732 and online at kpfa.org. And let me say, it would be good to make that challenge. It'd be great to go over it, considering that we were down as a radio station electronically from being able to raise money the last couple of hours. So we are behind, but we're back up and running. So again, you can help us at KPFA by giving us a call, 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732, online at kpfa.org. In Southern California, listening to KPFK in Los Angeles, the number you call to support your radio station is 818-985-5735, 818-985-5735, and online at kpfk.org. In the background, I hear my emergency alert going off on my phone. I'm not near my phone, so I can't see what is going on, but luckily I'm not near the one time I did it, and it was a tsunami warning. We didn't get one. It's like while I was on air trying to raise funds, and it like kind of hurt my attempts to do that. But it could be an Amber Alert. Who knows? I'm sure our listeners are hearing it as well. Richard Wolff, I think, I suspect, and I hope I'm right about this, that Donald Trump is trying to bite off too much. It feels like they're effectively trying to go after half the country. Like you could try to do it towards immigrants. It's much easier to scapegoat and horrible to do, but easier to scapegoat a minority, a small group, relatively speaking, small group, than it is half the country.
I hope you're right. I'm not persuaded, though, to be honest with you, Mitch. The history there is not so great. Minorities have been able, if not to persuade the majority, at least to get the majority to look the other way, to convince itself that it isn't all so bad. Because the mass of the American people don't want to have to worry that they're going to go to work for the next several years holding back a fact. Who wants to do that? That's an unwelcome demand. It's an unwelcome invitation. You're hoping that the institutions of the system will somehow perform those functions, and so you can rely on them. You're upset each time you see that that's not working. But yeah, he has gone way beyond the initial demonization of the immigrants. And if I could say a word again, just as an economist, we are a very rich nation. We still are, despite the decline of our empire. We're still one of the richer nations in the world. We have 330 million people. The total number of undocumented immigrants, according to the Department of Homeland Security under Mr. Trump, is 10, maybe 12 million people. Okay, you do not need an advanced degree in economics, although I have those, to be able to understand that there is no way on God's green earth that 10 to 12 of the poorest people in the world, because that's who's coming here in most cases, are going to be a shaper of the economy of 330 million people. That's silly. No group has that. And a group with as little resources as the immigrants, they don't have it for sure. Look at the people ICE is yanking. It's yanking them out of their jobs where they've been working, in many cases, for years, paying their taxes for years, doing their shopping to keep the local stores going for years, committing fewer crimes than native born America. That's the FBI's statistics. So, what are you doing? This is scapegoating for no reason. And by the way, history, I'm sure, will be looking back on this long after you and I are not here anymore and wondering to itself the same way we wonder about the German people. How could they have allowed to happen what happened? How could they have ovens where they killed large numbers of people?
I mean, this is
How
definitely going
the
to happen
American,
over Gaza. Yeah, what's happening in
yeah,
Gaza? Yeah, yeah. I mean, everyone. You
people
can't
are
say we didn't
already,
know.
yeah, people are
Well, World
already,
War II, you could at least say we didn't understand the gravity of what was going on in Germany until after. You can't say that here.
right. And I'm sure, I know already all kinds of people on all sides of these issues are wondering what happened to the Israeli people who, whatever you thought about Israel as a society, no one would have attributed this behavior to these people. No one would have
Should
done
we be
that with
should we be
German.
shocked? Should we be shocked that people who were traumatized end up traumatizing another?
Yeah. But in the history of my wife's a psychotherapist. You know her, has been on your program. She has explained to me over and over again that it is not unusual for a portion of the victims of trauma to then perform it on other people. I mean, I wish it weren't so. But if you look at who spanks their children, the chances that they got spanked are pretty good.
Yeah.
They didn't like it when they got spanked, but something in them is working it out. I don't want to over psychologize, but it's a serious problem here in the United States, and it does not look like at this point you're seeing the opposition. 501c3 tax exempt organizations, which I'm sure
We are.
KPFA is, and we all are, have been particularly singled out this last week by the orders of Mr. Trump. The IRS is instructed to go after them if they are, quote, in any way supportive of either anti American, I quote, anti capitalist, I quote, anti Christian, which are listed together. Okay, I mean, that's a license.
You don't think we would be characterized as anti-capitalist, do you?
Couldn't happen ever. No, you'd be sooner anti. I better not go there. But
Or
you
we're
can
just inviting it
understand
now?
these are extreme right wing ideologues who see an opportunity to incarcerate, destroy everything on the left that they can sweep into these incredibly broad definitions. People wonder, McCarthyism. Yeah, that's what this is. That's how it's working. The
We're,
president
we're-
says if you're anti-fascist, you are therefore a terror. I want to remind people who may not know. In the 1950s, the United States government arrested, imprisoned, deported people for being members of the Communist Party. That's it. They had signed a little card. I'm a member. They hadn't committed any crime. But the government decided that if you're a member, it means you advocate the overthrow of the United States government by force and violence. That was the quote. And so
oh,
communists would get up and
we
say,
are. I have another tyranny for you, the clock, and I've gone past it.
Okay.
And I have to say goodbye to you.
All right.
But I have loved our conversations. I've loved this one. I love you, sir.
Yes,
The
you are.
again to support KPFA. I can't even give you time to say anything nice about me, so too
All right.
bad. The phone number for KPFA is 1-800-439-5732, 1-800-439-5732 online at kpfa.org. Thank you for listening.
You're listening to 94.1 KPFA, 89.3 KPFB in Berkeley, 88.1 KFCF in Fresno, and online at kpfa.org. Coming up next, electronic infodata. I don't know.